Welcome to the Trimetric Roadmap, powered by Business Freedom Advisors, the podcast for business owners who want to grow their business and enjoy their life. Hey, I'm your host, Scott Landis, creator of the Trimetric Tracking System and author of Balancing Act. If you're tired of chasing success at the expense of your health, your marriage, or your peace of mind, you're in the right place. On this show, we help you track what really matters: business health, life quality, and leadership performance, all in one simple, powerful system. Because when those get out of sync, everything else starts to break down. Our goal here is to help you align it all so you can lead with clarity, scale with purpose, and finally enjoy the freedom you've been working so hard to create. And if it feels like no one's ever shown you how to pull that off, this podcast might just be the missing link you've been quietly searching for. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Okay, try this again. Welcome to the Trimetric Roadmap podcast, brought to you by Business Freedom Advisors. I'm Scott Landis, along with Jeff Jacob, and we've been going through a series in the Trimetric Roadmap podcast where we've been focusing on the executive performance piece of the Trimetric. So the Trimetric is business health, executive performance, and life quality. We're doing a series on executive performance, and we've just been going through the 7 elements of what is in the assessment of the executive performance assessment, which are, we started out with vision and strategic thinking. Number 2 is leadership presence and emotional maturity. Number 3 is communication and alignment. Number 4 is team engagement and culture building. 5, execution through others. That's where we were last week. Those are all in the can. Go back and check them out if you haven't seen them yet. Today, we're talking about number 6, which is customer and stakeholder stewardship. And then we'll round out the whole series next time with technology tools and intelligent systems. You're not going to want to miss that one. But today, it's customer and stakeholder stewardship. Often overlooked, but super important. So what is it? What is customer and stakeholder stewardship? This is about how well a founder stays connected to the people who affect the health of the business the most. We're talking about customers, clients, partners, investors, board members, any stakeholder in the business. Obviously, you're a stakeholder, but we want to make sure we're taking care of all of these relationships. So a lot of founders scale and accidentally drift too far away from the people who tell them the truth about the business. And this is a mistake we want people to avoid, Jeff, specifically by listening to this podcast, but in general, when they work with us, Business Freedom Advisors. But let's start with customers. So one of the main stakeholders is the customers. We can be too close, we can be too far. We want to kind of work through that. Where does that take your mind today, Jeff?
Well, that's part of why we discussed delegation last week, because delegation and the ability to not just delegate tasks like we discussed again last week, but to really delegate outcomes. And that is a huge aspect of this. And as a leader, we have to have that emotional maturity. We have to have the leadership skills, the executive performance element to be able to delegate well. And what we're talking about is the difference between addition and multiplication. So we can add money, we can add to the business by just delegating tasks to other people, and we still manage all of the high level things. But to really multiply a business, to really get through some of those roadblocks in the way of growth, it takes multiplication. And that means really delegating to the right people. We talked about how to do that last week. But to be able to bring the right people into being able to manage customers really well. And to do that, it's not just delegating the task of what it takes to handle a customer. It's really delegating the vision, the mission, the heart of the company as well. And you have to be able to truly trust that the people you're handing off these outcomes to are people who are going to carry on the heart of what the company is. And they are going to care about the customers. Nobody will care about them like you do, but the 80% rule, if they're really caring about them in a way that multiplies what this company can really accomplish. And so being able to do that really takes some time. It's what kind of a leader are you? Are you a leader who is over involved and micromanaging, or are you somebody who is just delegating too quickly and releasing everything to people before they're really ready? But the what we're trying to do is find that sweet spot where you are walking with people through things, uh, through the tasks, through the relationship. You're walking with them through it until you can trust them to handle it at an appropriate level. Again, not perfectly, but 80%. And that's when it's time to really let it go to them. But then once you do that, it's being the kind of leader who wants to stay informed. I want to stay in the loop rather than be asked for permission. Now, of course, there's boundaries to that. If somebody wants to spend over a certain limit, they need permission. If they want to change vendors, if they want to change customers, or drop a customer, you got to ask for permission for some of those things, maybe. But I don't want my people coming to me asking for every little minute detail of permission. I want to be kept in the loop most of the time, but I have to stay connected to what's actually happening with these customers at a place that I'm comfortable with so that I can make sure that the heart of the company is really being multiplied out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let's talk about some practical ways to do what you just said. Be connected, but not too connected, to have some authority over things, but not be controlling everything. Let's come back to that in just a second, but let me just reground this into why this matters. And so much of what we talk about with Business Freedom Advisors and on this podcast, the Trimetric Roadmap, is because we're working with founders. We're working with people that started off, they started a business, whether they took over a family business or started it from scratch. They had to put this hat of entrepreneurship aside and to put on the business owner hat and start thinking of this as not just a hobby or a lifestyle business, but a business, the business that has the potential to run without me. So we call those founders. We work on creating business, taking business owners from business owner to founder with freedom, so that you can walk away or you can have a business asset that runs without you. You have some optionality. So when you start out on the journey, it's so easy. This isn't a thing you think about. And obviously, I mean, we're
No.
using a fancy word, stakeholders. It really is just all about relationships. The quality of relationships is the quality of your life. The quality of relationships is the quality of your business. So if we just think about that, if we keep relationships solid at the forefront, it's going to go well, right? So there's some practical ways to do that. But when it was just you and a few others, when you were just starting things, when you had a handful of customers, it was easy to do this. This wasn't something you thought about. So we're talking about the stage of we're trying to go to that level of the business can start to run without me. You've got to think through this. And when's the best time to plant the tree? Like 10 years ago. But if you haven't started already, then start it today, so that that you can have it at some point. But these things that we're talking about, having a business that can run without you and customers that aren't so distant from you, but also a business that other people are handing those customers. It's a thing that you said, Jeff, needs to be thought through and managed. So how let's get to practical tools. How do you do it?
Yeah, we were talking about this with a private equity partner just last week, and most organizations, they'll grow just like what you were talking about, with the founder is involved in everything. And they've gotten to that place because of trusting their gut and having a good gut. And there's also, other aspects that come into play there, of course. But that's where we've found success, is doing that. But at this point, to be able to get through that next roadblock, to be able to grow beyond just ourselves, there has to be systems put in place. And that's part of what I love. I love systems, and partly because systems can be hurtful or they can be helpful. And I love being able to figure out what the right systems are for different organizations. Has to be based on who the founder is, but and then not putting in systems that limit the life of the organization, the heart of the organization, not limit what they are, but it's not like the road guards, the side rails that you have on roads. It's not those kind of systems, but the systems that are more like a skeleton is what I envision. And it's a skeleton kind of structure that life can grow from. And if you have a strong enough structure, have wide enough shoulders, for instance,
Hmm.
you can add on more mass. If you have the right bones in place, then the life of the organization can really grow in a healthy way. But it has to be based on the core values of what the company really is.
Nice. So one of the things that we recognize is the difference between stewardship versus control. And so if we were to define stewardship, it's not micromanaging every relationship, obviously, but it is creating an environment of trust and consistency and care around the relationships that matter most. And like you said, Jeff, there's a system for this. We encapsulate everything that we talk about in executive performance into what we call the executive performance system. And we have a
Mhm.
executive performance process to install that system into any business that we work with. And that's sort of what we've been working through in the podcast, and we'll continue to talk through that over time. So stay tuned, keep subscribed to this podcast, keep coming back and listening because we're gonna just share so much value around that. But let's contrast two different founder patterns, and I'll have you react to it. So one founder who disappears from key relationships too early or entirely, just says, "Oh, I've got people that handle that now. I'm not talking to customers anymore." There's issues with that. Or a founder who won't let anyone else carry relationships and becomes the bottleneck. Boy, I can think of some people like that, and they just never get some freedom. So talk through how to decide which stakeholder relationships must stay close to the founder, which ones can be delegated, you know, and maybe how do we not even have to worry about that? That's sort of where my mind goes. Where do you go with that?
Yeah, that's a really hard thing to feel out because you really do have to trust your gut with that. There are certain relationships that you need to keep because every level out in the org chart, I do org charts from the center out, not from the top down, but every level out on the org chart, there's a dilution of the vision. There's a dilution of the core heart of who you are because every step along the way, something gets lost from who this founder is and spreading it out.
Kind of like the
Um,
telephone game that we played when we were
exactly.
kids. Now
Yeah,
that's
the
the
leadership telephone game.
that's the you just said you just named a thing that commonly happens, but we don't have to settle for that. I would say if you have a good system in place, then you don't have that, at least as mitigated as possible. So yeah, keep going.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to implement things to mitigate that. And we talked about
Mhm.
that a few episodes back of you have to if you want the other people to bleed, you've got to hemorrhage. You've got to go high, far and above. But if you there's a there's a principle of leadership. This a leadership is a part of the executive performance aspect of what we do. And there's a executive performance rule where if you are, let's say on a 1 to 10 scale, you're a 6 as a leader, then you will attract people, unless you're a really humble, encouraging leader, you will attract people that are 6s or lower, usually lower. But if you want people who are 8s in your leadership team, then you're going to have to be an 8. And so, we get so one of the things that leaders don't have is time. And yet we have to prioritize our executive performance development, our leadership development, so that we can be as good of a leader as possible and attract as good of leaders as possible. But those great leaders around you are not going to be satisfied with their job if you are micromanaging them or if you're not there to support them. It's a mindset shift of, as the head leader, we are not meant to be there to discipline our team. We are meant to equip our team. And so there's an equipping model of leadership that we need to embrace. Otherwise, we're going to be restricting the type of people and then what those people are able to really accomplish as well.
Nice. All right. So if you're listening, I want you to take a second and just pause and ask yourself this question: where, with your customers, in the stage of your business where you're at now, where are you too absent from them, and where are you too involved? Who are you too absent from? Who are you too involved with? And depending on where you are in the stage and growth cycle of your business, those are going to apply totally different, those questions. So, but it's just good gut check. Like Jeff was saying, you kind of have to trust your gut. Ask yourself that question, those two questions, and then act accordingly. Write it down, move forward. And okay, so let's move on from customers to other stakeholders. Again, relationships that matter, stakeholders that have a stake in your business, that care about your business. Besides customers, besides employees, you have strategic partners, you have investors, maybe referral partners, board members, community leaders, key vendors even. So these are all people that care or have a stake in your business or in what your business does. And the reflection question there is, who are the 5 to 10 people outside your internal team whose trust most affects your future? Think about that. 5 to 10 people outside your internal team whose trust most affects your future. And so if we kind of broaden the conversation beyond customers, it's not just paying customers, it's those people we mentioned. How can founders unintentionally under communicate with these groups, and why is stakeholder trust often overlooked and missed, and what can we do to build consistency through the growth of the business here? Jeff, what are your thoughts on that one?
I think we overlook them a lot because they're not the ones that are directly bringing money in. The customers are the people who are going to give you a check. The vendors are the people who you have to pay or spend time with, but they indirectly affect the bottom line. And so the less directly people affect the bottom line, the more we have the risk of ignoring them and not giving them enough attention. And therefore, we have to realize the whole system of what it is and value the whole system. I think we've all been in organizations where we've had leaders who don't value something because they're not in it and they just release it to other people. We also have leaders who care too much about something and then therefore are micromanaging it, and they want great leaders to lead that area, but they don't have, but they are too micromanagement in it because they care so much. And both of those are going to limit your ability to affect the bottom line or grow. And so it's the same as with the customers that we were talking about, is really bringing people on who you can trust and looking at that scale of, as you're developing leaders, there's a scale of competency versus character. And you want people on that line, you want to care about both. So you don't just hire people that are competent but don't have character. You don't just hire people who have character but aren't competent. You need to be able to find the right balance of character versus competence. And it matters. Each role is different. And so understanding what that role is to manage, let's say, vendors versus managing customers. And at a smaller level, you'll probably have to start with somebody who's doing some of both. And so therefore, what kind of character, what kind of competency do you need to have for that role? And getting them in the right seat on the bus is the metaphor we use a lot.
Yeah. And this is obviously challenging and gets more challenging the bigger you get. But here's what we want to kind of have as our North Star. So, I mean, we don't want you to over communicate with everyone. That would be swinging the pendulum too far. But the right people, if you can think about it this way, your guiding light. The right people should never feel forgotten. And you might be thinking about them, but do they know you're thinking about them? If you can get to a place where the right people, the right stakeholders never feel forgotten, there's some practical things you can do. I mean, I've seen, some great things are, if you do some extra touches like send people old-fashioned mail, a card in the mail for wedding anniversary, for birthdays, everybody has birthdays, do it. It's a good idea. Christmas cards, good. Not everybody does wedding anniversary. If you can pay attention to when their wedding anniversary, who gets a card in the mail from some, like, let's say let's make a crazy idea. You send it to a vendor. Why would you do that? Well, I've walked through many business owners situations where cash flow gets tight and you're like, hey, how's your relationship with your vendor? Do you think you could give them a call and say, hey, can we push this out to a 15-day or a 30-day or a 60-day? Like, how far out could we set these terms? And that can make a huge difference in the cash flow, especially in a challenging time. If your vendors, if you call your vendor and they're like, who are you? That's not a good thing. So that kind of highlights, just one reason why this could be important. So here's some, before I go
There's
into.
systems for that, though, Scott. There's systems for that because I don't care about any of that stuff. I
Mhm.
greatly care about people, and it matters. And side note, look up different ways to pay,
Mm,
people with that other than
besides
money.
money. Yeah.
Besides money,
Hmm.
yeah, there's all kinds of different ways. Look that up later. We've talked about it, whatever. But
Hmm.
I care greatly about people. I don't remember people's kids' names, their
Hmm.
dogs, what's going on with their dog. I don't, it's not my anniversary. Why do I care about their anniversary? They should celebrate that, not me. But people care about that stuff. And so
Right.
since it's so hard for me to manage those things, I've had assistants that's part of their job is to manage the details of people's lives. And
Hmm.
then they'll say, hey, it's this person's birthday, or hey, this person's kid broke their arm. You should give them a
Mm,
text or something. I've had
yeah.
other people manage that because I understand my weaknesses and
Hmm.
therefore I manage around those. I don't just give in to them. I manage
Hmm.
around those appropriately.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make such a great point. I mean, we're all wired differently. Most business owners that I know aren't necessarily wired to nurture relationships. They're more driving forward, getting objectives done, knocking people over on accident in the process. So to bring in a nurturer, it's a great hire. If you are, one of the first hires we tend to have people make is, executive assistant. Make sure that person is wired completely different from you. They're thinking about different
Yeah.
things. They are thinking about relationships, and that'll be a huge asset for you. But let's talk about we're moving towards landing the plane here, and some common red flags that I want you to think about. If you have had customer complaints that surprised you, seems like they came out of nowhere, that could be a red flag. Stakeholders who only hear from you when something was needed. I kind of alluded to that. Key relationships that depend too much on your charisma and not enough on a system. We want to avoid that. And you can probably think of businesses that where it's all relying on the charisma of the founder, and there's not a strong enough system to carry that business forward. So don't make that mistake. Um, this is very common. You might assume loyalty rather than a trend of trust. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. But a lot of times you kind of assume loyalty. If you're assuming anything, that's a danger zone. But if you're assuming people are going to be loyal, let's talk about ways to avoid that. But real quick, I want to kind of end with that note. But some self-check questions. Do I have a real pulse on customer experience? Assess that. Write that down. Ask yourself that. What comes to mind? Do key stakeholders hear from me consistently? If not, what are some ways that you could put some process in place that make that happen? Would these relationships stay healthy if I step back for 30 days? If I personally step back, would systems and process um, step in? And that's really what we want for our clients, our founders, to be able to step back from the business. And like we've been talking about on this episode, still have a pulse on the business. So When it comes to like the best tools and tricks and, like sending out cards, that's a little tactic, right? What our big message is today, Jeff, is you should have a foundational process that transfers knowledge, thinking, core values. So we've talked about core values and vision, but just the way you think through things, that knowledge can be transferred if you have the right process. And this, again, is what we call the executive performance process. You need an executive performance process in your business if you are going to have optionality and be able to scale and eventually sell or exit the business as a founder with freedom. So if you don't think you have an adequate executive performance process installed in your business, then definitely what's the next step? You got to go to trimetricquiz.com. That's the best step. Take the 56 questions. Are going to take you 15 or so minutes to go through it, but you're going to get a robust trimetric snapshot, and it's going to show you not only your business health and life quality score, but your executive performance score. And it's going to be an indicator, and you'll have automatic next steps out of that on how to get that executive performance process that you definitely need in your business to be able to scale. So that's where we are for today. Jeff, final word back to you.
Well, there's a lot of technology that can be brought into that. Next week, we're going to go into more of a deep dive about how you can integrate technology with the system and what the system actually, or some systems that can actually work for you. The one that we have that works really well. Scott's been coaching me on that. Scott's been my biggest mentor in that my whole life, actually, for lots of years. And so I'm really excited to hear from Scott next week with that. I think that's going to be one of the most powerful podcasts we've done. No pressure, Scott.
Yeah, I'll deliver next week. Technology, tools, and intelligent systems. It makes all of the stuff easier, right? All right. Well, thanks for listening to the Trimetric Roadmap podcast. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Trimetric Roadmap powered by Business Freedom Advisors. I've been your host, Scott Landis. If you're growing a business but something still feels off, you're not alone. That's exactly why we created the Trimetric Quiz. It's not a personality test. It's a powerful diagnostic tool that shows you where you're in alignment and where things may be silently slipping off track across your business, life, and leadership. It only takes a few minutes, and the clarity you'll gain is a game changer. Go to trimetricquiz.com to take the quiz now before the cost of staying stuck gets any higher. Until next time, stay focused, stay aligned, and keep building a business that truly supports your life.